Shadow hack. Who was Li Yunmu? The ruthless person who stepped upon the 6 elites of Chaotian sect a few days ago. No one had expected that no more than 10 days after that event, he would go out of his way to disrupt Chaotian sect's plans. Extremely ruthless. He had cleared the 70th level before anyone else? And with a cultivation of golden crystal layer? For a while, many people were speechless, unable to comprehend what they had just heard. The majority believed that he wasn't qualified to compete with the 12 sons and daughters of heavens, but he actually rushed to the top a step faster than them, achieving supreme glory. However, it didn't matter, because Li Yunmu wasn't part of the bets offered by the 3 largest companies. Although many people were frightened when he suddenly appeared, they soon discovered that it was a false alarm since Li Yunmu stepping foot on the 70th level didn't affect their bets. Yet he was still an extremely ruthless person full of viciousness. Before his fight with Ching, he forcibly snatched the imminent fame that was about to fall in the other party's hand. Naturally, such thoughts were entertained only by ordinary fluxers and normal people who didn't know what was happening behind the scenes. The powerful people and great powers knew that Li Yunmu had cleared the 70th level at a crucial time. They all breathed a sigh of relief, which was soon followed by a swift intake of deep breath. Li Yunmu had stepped foot into the 70th level? With a cultivation of golden crystal layer which was a step lower than that of others? There was only one thing everyone could take from this youngster is too ferocious. This was the thought of many influential and powerful people at the first moments of receiving this information. Clearing Tower of Glory's 70th level was just too ruthless. It must be known that in the last 10 years, even the fiercest flux disciple layer had only been able to step into the 78th level and not farther. But this person had long ago ascended to the 6th dimension and turned into a senior. Moreover, S.H.A.D.W, who was considered as the most powerful person in the 5th dimension, had only been able to reach the 74th level. But it couldn't be viewed as simply a difference of just a few levels. After the 70th level, advancing past the next level was like crossing a gargantuan abyss. Therefore, S.H.A.D.W reaching the 74th level was already quite terrifying. The 70th level of Tower of Glory had always been considered as a threshold. It was also known as the control line. As long as any flux disciple crossed it, then they would be viewed as an unhindered fluxer, meaning he would have no rival in the entire 5th dimension and could go anywhere. There weren't many of those who had reached this level. Li Yunmu knew only of S.H.A.D.W, Man Tian, Hai Yu, Zhang Wen, and a few others who could be counted on 2 hands. However, he crossed this line even though he was a newcomer. After being out of the spotlight for 10 days, he actually stupefied everyone by clearing the 70th level. After this, the majority of influential and powerful people had only one thought in their minds: a wolf has appeared. He was really a wolf, and one that was extremely young. He was rushing forward like torrential rain and howling winds. If previously the majority of people believed that although Li Yunmu was very formidable, he didn't have the qualifications to step across the control line, then he had now beaten a different opinion into their heads. Even if he was a rookie, he still possessed the qualifications to join the very best of the Fluxer disciples. At this moment, Man Tian's group at Ocean City had also received the news from the Tower of Glory. Many of them were left tongue-tied. After a long while, Man Tian slowly raised his head. Seems like I underestimated this person. Yes, he's really a formidable dragon. A bitter smile made its way to the face of Green Wolf. At some barren region in the wilderness, S.H.A.D.W and G.E.A., these 2 vagrant lions of the wilderness, were also startled at this moment. Li Yunmu? He's really growing too quickly. A hint of seriousness finally appeared on S.H.A.D.W's face. Like everyone, he hadn't expected that Li Yunmu would be able to clear the 70th level of Tower of Glory so quickly. Let alone S.H.A.D.W, none of the major powers of the 6 continents had expected this. This young king, it seems like he also desires the qualifications to enter the Continental battle. Interesting, interesting. G.E.A. standing in the wind howled with laughter. His expression became colder with each moment that passed. The smiles on Chaotian Sect's people were frozen. But they still had a ray of hope that Li Yunmu won't act for the sole purpose of harming them and insist on snatching the last component of refining pagoda from in front of Ching. He won't, he certainly won't. We already possess 2 parts of the refining pagoda. He certainly won't pay such a large price to obtain something useless to him. However, Chaotian Sect's people soon felt as if they were being suffocated to death by Li Yunmu's actions. At the next instant, all the flux disciples of the 6 continents received a notification from the Fluxer Association. Congratulations, Central Continent's Li Yunmu. You have obtained the 3rd part of the Transcending Sage tool in exchange for 888 tower badges. This time, Li Yunmu hadn't concealed the information that he had obtained a part of a Transcending Sage tool from the Tower of Glory. Obtaining ordinary product naturally wouldn't be noticed, so there wouldn't be any notification, but there were only 3 Transcending Sage tools in the entire tower, and they naturally belonged to a different class. Thus, this time, the information was broadcasted to everyone. Once this information came out, all the fluxers in the world suddenly felt suppressed. Li Yunmu had surprisingly spent 888 tower badges just to exchange for the final part of refining pagoda. Vicious, extremely vicious. Many people knew that Chaotian Sect had already gotten their hands on 2 parts of the refining pagoda long ago. Hence, Li Yunmu didn't gain anything by spending such a large amount of tower badges and obtaining the final part. This was true viciousness and great boldness. How does he dare? How does he dare to act like this? He dares. An elder of Chaotian Sect in the palace hall at the main peak seemed to have gone wild. No one had expected that Li Yunmu would dare to act like this, dare to be so bold, to exchange for just a part of the transcending treasure while sacrificing a lot of money. But Li Yunmu had done so. At this time, when Li Yunmu got his hands on the 3rd component of refining pagoda, another notification suddenly came from the Tower of Glory. In it, there was nothing unexpected. The Fluxer Association had released 2 repeated notifications. Congratulations, Holy Spirit Continent's Ching, for successfully crossing the 70th level and claiming the glory. These repeated notifications followed just after the notifications about Li Yunmu, and a strange expression appeared on everyone's faces. Ha ha ha, this Chaotian Sect's Ching really has miserable luck, hey. Yes, at this moment, Ching was really pitiful. After exhausting Chaotian Sect's resources and suffering countless tribulations, he had managed to clear the 70th level of the tower. After attaining his goal, he didn't care for anything else and rushed straight to the tower steel, wishing to quickly exchange for refining pagoda's 3rd part. He searched and searched, but even after going through the list twice, he still couldn't find it. It cannot be. I'm just too tense, need to take a deep breath. He naturally searched again to confirm, but he still couldn't find it. Soon, he checked the recently exchanged items on the tower steel and saw the information refining pagoda's spirit, recipient Li Yunmu. Time, barely a minute ago. Bang! Ching felt as if he had been struck by a bolt of lightning. The most important part, the spirit of refining pagoda, had been surprisingly retrieved by Li Yunmu just a minute ago. What bullshit is this? Chapter 222, On the Verge of Huge Changes. Just after Li Yunmu came out of the tower, the 2 declarations carrying the news that Ching had cleared the 70th level of Tower of Glory was being transmitted. Vu, this was a close call. Fortunately I entered a day earlier than he. When Li Yunmu heard the information, the corner of his lips curled upwards to reveal a hint of a glittering smile. Fortunately, he'd had the assistance of 2 parts of the Azure Dragon deity suit. If he hadn't used them, he wouldn't be standing here now and would have been delayed for a long time. He had to accept that after crossing the 65th level, the difficulty of each successive level became much greater, and the monsters also became more formidable, more difficult to kill. In fact, Li Yunmu almost lost his life when fighting against the last boss at the 70th level. If he hadn't gotten the Mist Fiend Devil King from the special dimensional box and his combat strength hadn't increased to its current level, then killing the last major boss would have been next to impossible. He had to say it was a very narrow escape. He had almost gotten to the point of losing, but in the end still managed to be a step quicker than Ching and obtain the last part of Refining Pagoda. Refining Pagoda was one of the major transcending sage tools within the Tower of Glory. On the basis of the minimum conditions for each of the 3 transcending sage tools, it was clear that Flux Ancestor had allocated them for ordinary crystal, silver crystal, and golden crystal layers respectively. Void Disk required an ordinary crystal fluxer to reach the 25th level of the tower, only then could one exchange for its final part. Each part also required 888 tower badges. If a black crystal fluxer tried to exchange for it, then the price would be doubled, and if was a silver crystal fluxer, then the price would be triple the original, which was already extremely high. This was the reason why even people who had sufficient tower badges didn't dare to exchange for it. The price simply became too high after it doubled or tripled. The exchange price for the last part of Refining Pagoda was perfectly equal to the amount of tower badges collected by Rainbow Crystal Fluxers after clearing the 70th level. Thus after Li Yunmyu cleared it, he hadn't only picked his target, the third part of the Refining Pagoda, but also chose an extremely deadly weapon with the remaining tower badges. With the extremely deadly weapon entering his arsenal, he finally gained the confidence to deal with the Divine Blood King class beasts in the King's true territory. Because of it, he was now in an extremely good mood. Congratulations, Lord Azure Dragon! I have come to safely escort you on the order of Her Ladyship Vega. Under the tower, the female commander of battle Sage Vega, who was extremely thorough, was waiting under the orders given to her. Fortunately I didn't betray your master's trust and got my hands on this piece at just the perfect time. It was really an extremely close call, Li Yunmyu said with a laugh. The female commander who had been waiting outside had, in truth, been quite anxious for Li Yunmyu. The piece of transcending sage tool which was the key for Chaotian Sect's success had almost been obtained by Ching. When many people who looked down upon Ching's personal strength found out that the time they had estimated he would require was wrong, they realized that with the assistance of Chaotian Sect, his strength had certainly increased greatly. Although the people dispatched by all the continents to disrupt Chaotian Sect's plan failed, Li Yunmyu was successful at the last moment, allowing the governing authorities in each continent to breathe a sigh of relief. Lord Azure Dragon, let's move. Her Majesty Vega is waiting for your return. The female commander left together with him while beaming with smiles. In a short while, Li Yunmyu once again saw Battle Sage Vega. You're really good. I had arranged many other candidates, but they all lost. You were the only one to succeeded. To be honest, you weren't the one I was most optimistic about. Battle Sage Vega's tone had become even gentler this time, and her words even more frank. If not the brilliant flame being emitted at all times by the dual-star Supreme Suit's armor on her body, she would resemble a kind senior. It was no wonder then that all people of the central continent and even the people of other continents admired her. She was the gentlest and closest to ordinary people quasi-deity. Having such a defender goddess was really a great fortune for the people of the central continent. Your ladyship is overpraising. This junior was just a bit luckier than his peers and nothing more. In front of a battle sage, Li Yunmyu didn't dare to be reckless and spoke with extreme modesty. Luck is also a part of one's ability. If I hadn't had that fortuitous encounter, I wouldn't have been able to see this day and lived out my life as an ordinary woman. Battle Sage Vega smiled without the slightest hint of dismay regarding her origins. At the moment, she was very interested in Li Yunmyu and also appeared to be quite fond of him. This was perhaps because his background was quite similar to hers. As for the rumor about the Li sect standing behind Li Yunmyu or the mysterious domain sage had invited before, they didn't mean anything. Such things could convince all the normal people, ordinary and domain sages, but they weren't sufficient for a battle sage. A person with a mental state which was without any flaws was just too tyrannical. Not to mention that behind battle sage Vega stood the imperial court of Central Continent. She had great influence and status in the imperial court, so if she wanted to check Li Yunmu's personal information, she could obtain definite and convincing answers right there. Battle sage Vega and Li Yunmu had a long conversation, during which Li Yunmu learned about the events that had taken place after he had entered the Tower of Glory. When he listened to the great changes, he was completely dumbstruck. In just 2 short days, so many major events had happened in the outside world. Bestial sage had died. Many flux sages had encountered enemies, perishing one after another. And even flux disciples and flux masters were being killed. Li Yunmu, who possessed a sharp intuition, instantly became aware that given the great upheaval, some great changes were about to happen. Your ladyship, I want to ask you about the Continental battle, Li Yunmu said with some hesitation. He had some information about it, but it wasn't enough. This was a grand contest organized by the 6 continents and took place every 3 years. Flux disciples and flux masters could both participate, and it was the great stage which gave rise to many formidable names in the past. However, since it was meant as a contest, then it was really just a contest. Regardless of how majestic it was or how much attention it attracted, it could only remain a show. Yet after Bestial Sage's death, one after another many formidable people met with accidents. Li Yunmu, with his sharp intuition, could clearly sense that some earth-shattering secret was certainly concealed behind this continental battle. Otherwise, why would a character like Battle Sage Vega be alerted by a trifling battle contest and personally kill Bestial Sage only to obtain the second part of Azure Dragon deity suit for a nobody like Li Yunmu? Battle sages and domain sages from all walks of life were now making their moves and secretly killing many sage-level characters. This was simply terrifying. And normally, given your strength, you wouldn't possess the qualifications to learn this secret. Battle Sage Vega paused for an instant, then revealed a hint of information. But this time's continental battle is different, because Earth is going to undergo a major transformation soon. You must obtain the qualifications to enter the continental battle. This time, it won't only affect the future situation of the central continent, but can also prove to be a major opportunity for you. When Li Yunmu left Vega Palace, great waves were surging in his heart, which he couldn't pacify for a long time. Earth was going to undergo a major transformation? Battle Sage Vega hadn't revealed much, but her single sentence allowed Li Yunmu to realize that something really major was going to happen next. It was no wonder then that sage-level characters had made their moves in such a short period of time. The secret concealed behind the upcoming event was even more serious than Li Yunmu had thought. Not only was it related to his personal growth, but would also change the future power structure of the 6 continents and even cause a great transformation in the current situation on Earth. What kind of transformation was going to happen there? Li Yunmu had a vague feeling that the after effect of this time's transformation would not be inferior to the changes caused 200 years ago by the dimensional shooting star falling to Earth. Chapter 223, The Emergence of Formidable People. System: gather all the information related to the secret behind continental battle and the upcoming changes to Earth. The first thing Li Yunmu did after leaving Vega Palace was to order the system to find out more about what was happening. Host, I have already started gathering the data pertaining to this matter. However, I must remind Host that you must not have high expectations. There isn't much information that can be gathered on the network. The system had already started to research and so already knew that the results wouldn't be so great. Don't care about that. Even finding some hints will be good, so set this matter as a priority. Li Yunmu was prepared for anything, but this matter was just too important to leave it to chance. The upcoming event pertained not only to him but humanity as a whole. If he couldn't find any information regarding it, then he'd be able to only watch passively as the changes happened, unable to affect them. Li Yunmu didn't want to be just a passive spectator. He wanted to be the person causing the changes. All right, the system replied. After coming out of the Vega Palace, the female commander of Vega Royal Guard brought a chariot. Your Lordship Azure Dragon, under the orders of her ladyship, I will escort you to the King City. What about transfer points? This female commander was called Zhang Wei. Her cultivation was at Nirvana layer, and she was one of the most trusted followers of Battle Sage Vega. She was the commander of Vega Royal Guard, which had 8 female warriors besides her. The strength of each individual warrior was at temporal layer. That's right, none of them was weaker than Lin Yuero. Even in the whole central continent, temporal experts were as rare as a day Kylan's Horn 1, but this was just the tip of a battle sage's profound strength and nothing more. Li Yunmu didn't dare to oppose Zhang Wei's words, but since he still wanted to know, he had asked about transfer points with some hesitation. There is a little bit of a problem with Earth's spatial fields. The transfer points can still be used for small distances, but as for large distance transfer points, even domain sages wouldn't dare to use them casually now, Zhang Wei said gloomily. Hearing this, Li Yunmu took a deep breath. Spatial fields had become unstable? Even domain sages couldn't use the points casually? At this moment, Li Yunmu became certain that there was really something wrong with Earth, now that he learned that its spatial fields had become unstable. Anyone who used a large-scale transfer could get lost in a spatial crack or maybe even be torn to shreds. Thank you. Li Yunmu forcefully kept his calm and bowed towards the female commander. She had revealed a little information to him, which was very important. It's nothing much, although I had a selfish motive in doing so. Your Lordship Azure Dragon, if you find a female flux disciple named Zhangting, then I request you to show consideration to her. The female commander took out a life-saving jade seal and gifted it to Li Yunmu. This jade seal can hold against 5 full-strength attacks of a Nirvana Flux Master, and before it breaks, it can teleport you at a random location 5 kilometers away from your original location. Please accept. Li Yunmu was shocked inwardly. Abnormal, this jade seal is too abnormal. It was several times more formidable than the jade coin given by Lin Yuero. This was clearly a treasure which could only be refined by a battle sage. Its final life-saving ability of teleportation was simply unimaginable. The treasure as a whole was extremely similar in its use to the reincarnation tree in Li Yunmu possession. When a reincarnation tree was grown at some secret location, a piece of bark taken from it could resist an all-out attack of a sage-level expert and instantly teleport its user. The person would be teleported to the location where the reincarnation tree was growing, and the user would be out of danger's way. The life-saving jade seal might not be as effective as the reincarnation tree, but it was still an extremely formidable life-saving treasure. Faced with such a life-saving treasure, Li Yunmu couldn't decline. Since this item could save his life someday, he silently collected it and asked, "Who is Zhangting?" "This is her photograph. In the future, if your lordship sees her in some difficulty, then I request you to show her some consideration. She is my little sister." Okay. Li Yunmu didn't question the female commander about the gift. She was a Nirvana layer expert, so it was surprising that her sister might need any consideration from Li Yunmu, but who was he to question her? While the female commander was making her request, Li Yunmu had gained some information, and he believed that the system would have certainly gleaned some answers from it. After Li Yunmu entered the chariot on the request of the female commander, before long, he realized that the chariot had left the ground and was moving through the air. Clearly, this was an extremely strange runic chariot which was an extremely precious treasure. Li Yunmu even had a feeling that this was Battle Sage Vega's personal chariot being used to safely escort him to Hangxia's king city. His true protection wasn't the female warriors but the chariot itself. Since it was Battle Sage Vega's personal vehicle, who would dare to lay a hand on Li Yunmu? The 2 mounts which were pulling the chariot also weren't ordinary creatures. According to the system's identification, the 2 mounts were sacred beasts Kamaitachi's 2. They were 7th dimension's extremely rare heavenly beasts which could walk on air. Their speed was relatively fast, able to surpass the speed of wings of the wind. Even the beasts under the control of a battle sage weren't simple. Li Yunmu suddenly felt that this world was indeed too large. He was a flux disciple, one who could stand among the best of them, but compared to the experts on earth, he was still insignificant. Li Yunmu closed his eyes to rest and muttered to himself, "It doesn't matter, I just started walking on this path. There will be a day when I will certainly reach the top of this world." Given that he was the master of the system, he didn't need to underestimate himself. This time's destination was Hangzhou King City, Azure Dragon Mansion. This place had been classified as Li Yunmu's official residence, but he hadn't been there before. Currently, he wanted to use Battle Sage Vega's power to see his mother and father in the real world, and use the time before the Continental battle to regrow his father's limbs. While Li Yunmu was moving towards Hangzhou King City, the results of the competition at the Tower of Glory were slowly spreading. After Ching had left everyone in the dust and became the first one to cross the 70th level, Zhongshan Onling came up second, just minutes after him. At the final moment, the fifth largest clan of Northern Continent had fully displayed the enormous strength of their clan. If Chaotian Sect hadn't been preparing for so long, then probably Ching wouldn't have been able to come out first. The third person was Yan Xing, who belonged to the sect of Extreme Devil Path. At the fourth position, there was an upset. The person who took this place was actually Devil. This was a person who didn't have any backing. His result caused many major powers to crease their brows. None of them had expected that Devil would be able to clear the 70th level, let alone come at the fourth place. The fifth person was Ching Yu, Hai Yu's little sister. She was the younger sibling of Transcending Power Sea God Temple's holy daughter. Ching Yu herself might not be affiliated to a transcending power, but the Sea God's people considered her as one of the two moons. Due to her coming out only fifth, Man Tian's group suddenly felt a little pressure. The Earth is really on the verge of some major transformation. All the major powers are making their move, so this time's continental battle won't lack difficulty, Men Shan said. Even the most powerful characters in the 6 continents couldn't think to achieve victory alone. Not only Man Tian's group but all the other proud sons and daughters of heavens were feeling that the situation now was extremely critical. At this instant, no one dared to say that they would be able to achieve victory. The 6th person was Xie, and the 7th was Ling Shuang. Despite having to confront members of many major power while being rookie fluxers, these 2 disciples of battle sages had overcome all obstacles. The other continents couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. The central continent, which was considered as the most powerful continent, still had such a profound foundation. At this time, it was actually the central continent which had tried to stop Chaotian Sect's plans most fiercely. Even the disciples of battle sages were mobilized. There was still 1 month left before the continental battle. No one had any doubt that these 2 disciples of battle sages would make great progress, given that they had already displayed such magnificent results. Although 1 month's time wasn't considered a lot for ordinary fluxers, but for disciples of battle sages, it was sufficient to allow them to greatly improve their strength. At this moment, almost every person coveting qualifications to enter the continental battle was feeling great pressure. Chapter 224, Great Chaos. Ren Sujun came 8. When many powers heard that Ren Sujun, a loner, had crossed the 70th level, they were left speechless. Just like Devil, another loner fluxer without any background had crossed the 70th level? This was extremely baffling. But soon, an anonymous poster revealed that 10 days ago Ren Sujun had been secretly taken in as a disciple by a young battle sage from a higher dimensional continent. Instantly, this news raised a great uproar. She was actually taken in as a disciple by a battle sage. But why had the battle sage suddenly done that? The requirements to become a disciple of a battle sage were high, very high. Under normal circumstances, only those who had awakened recently were accepted as disciples, not those who had already established their foundation. This was because a recently awakened disciple was like a blank sheet of paper. A battle sage could then slowly lay the proper foundation on this blank sheet. Yet Ren Sujun was not like this. This was an extremely exceptional event. Unusual, this was extremely unusual. Before long, the 9th person also cleared the 70th level. It was Tyrant Zhang. Ordinary people didn't pay much attention to him. Since he was the last person to clear the 70th level, the limelight did not shine on him even for a moment. But given that he had cleared the 70th level at all, his importance increased a lot in the eyes of many formidable people. This was not because of any other reason but that unlike Ching and Zhongshan Onling who had surpassed him, Tyrant Zhang had matured very quickly. A year ago, he could only be said to have been a flux disciple with above-average combat strength and a little fame. He was far from being considered as one of the people standing at the top of the flux disciples hierarchy. However, just a year later, that was no longer the case. He could already be considered as one of the unhindered flux disciples who could walk tall in the 5th dimension. This was because he had accidentally inherited an innately formidable bloodline at the desolate continent. He was a rogue fluxer, but because he had obtained an innately formidable bloodline and passed the 70th level of the Tower of Glory, he instantly became a person of high importance in the eyes of many powers. But no one had expected that just after he came out of the Tower of Glory, he would be invited by a subordinate of Barbarian King. As this news spread, all the people in the 6 continents were left flabbergasted. Tyrant Zhang was invited by Barbarian King? What did Barbarian King see in him? What was going on here? Those who weren't aware of the situation felt that all the recent events were extremely weird. First, Devil, who didn't have any background, had astonishingly outdone Xiu and Ling Shuang, who were disciples of battle sages, and became the 4th person to cross the 70th level in this competition. After that, someone revealed that the female rogue fluxer Ren Sujun had suddenly been accepted as a disciple by a young battle sage against the usual tradition of accepting disciples. And now, a subordinate of Barbarian King came to wait for Tyrant Zhang to leave the Tower of Glory. Desolate continents' barbarian kings were all unrivaled existences. There was one in each generation, and among the evolved humans of the desolate continent, the status and strength of a barbarian king were equal to those of battle sages in other continents. All of them were quasi-deity level existences. However, at this moment, both battle sages and barbarian kings were recklessly taking in people as if it was a competition. Immediately, the fluxers who didn't belong to any major powers began to realize that something was afoot. The recent events were just too unusual. It was as if the common conventions no longer applied to the world around. In fact, the events that took place in the next few days gave them even more reason for concern. The next day after the competition, one after another, many organizations and large clans sent their disciples and clan members to clear the 70th level of the Tower of Glory. The number of fluxers challenging the tower had increased greatly, rising to more than several tens of people. Among these, more than a dozen challengers were already extremely famous. None of these people were weak, but after being urged by the organizations and clans behind them, all of them began to appear to challenge the tower. Every one of them had only one goal, and that was to clear the 70th level and become an unhindered fluxer. On this day, among the several tens of tower challengers, the people who finally cleared the 70th level numbered a dozen. Once this information came out, the entire world was stunned. When did the major checkpoint of the 70th level become so easy to clear? Almost every person had this question in their heart. It must be known that when the rankings were revised every year, if the number of people who could clear the 70th level reached 10, that was considered pretty good. However, the onlookers suddenly discovered that, one after another, formidable fluxers continued to appear, like fish trying to make the dragon's leap, staking their lives to clear the 70th level. On this day, many people cleared the 70th level, but even more nameless and obscure but extremely formidable people died trying to do so and never came out. It mattered not, though. On the day after, the situation became even more crazy. Another group of core disciples from many organizations and clans from the 6 continents appeared with the 70th level as the goal. In a short while, even ordinary people began to feel that something was odd. The major powers of all 6 continents seemed to have gone crazy. In the background of all this, even the outside world became more chaotic. Many experts were being killed one after another by some mysterious attacker. Even Sage-level powerhouses weren't an exception and were being hunted down. 5th dimension, 6th dimension, 7th dimension, and even on the plane of Earth, many formidable experts kept perishing every day. All the victims had one thing in common: they possessed some unusual treasure which brought the disaster upon them. Soon, many people noticed something. All the powers in the 6 continents were going crazy in their attempts to obtain extraordinary treasures for their candidates challenging the tower. The goal of their actions was only one: to accumulate enough reserves for their challenger to successfully clear the 70th level. This was crazy. The entire world seemed to have gone crazy. At this time, Li Yunmu had already reached Hangzhou King City and arrived at the mansion assigned to him. The Azure Dragon Mansion was quite large, its area crossing 3,000 square m. Just the value of this mansion alone could allow an ordinary family to live without any worries for more than 10 generations. Li Yunmu finally had the chance to meet face to face with his parents and elder sister in the real world. Since he had also brought sacred life water and a sacred pill, his father's, Li's Hongman's, limb regenerated, and he was once again back on his feet. The entire family celebrated Li Yunmu's homecoming, and he enjoyed the peaceful days with them. However, after only a couple had passed, the female commander Zhang Wei reminded him that he must return to the 5th dimension as soon as possible. This was because Li Yunmu was being carefully monitored. Even if he was being protected by battle sage Vega's personal troops, the female commander still felt a hint of pressure. Although her troops were extremely formidable, Li Yunmu's popularity was more than their intimidation factor. Zhang Wei was afraid that some power may act recklessly and launch an attack, thus she reminded Li Yunmu to not dally. Li Yunmu quickly agreed to the suggestion, and under the protection of the troops, he stepped into the transfer point to the 5th dimension. Chapter 225, Human-Shaped Monster. It was completely normal for the female commander to feel anxious. The 6 continents were in great chaos at the moment, and even sage-level powerhouses were at the risk of getting killed. In this kind of predicament, what did one need to say about Li Yunmu's chances? However, as long as he returned to the 5th dimension, his safety would be guaranteed. Yet Li Yunmu had underestimated the lunacy of fluxers from all walks of life. When he as an independent fluxer easily cleared the 70th level of the Tower of Glory, he naturally turned into the most coveted target. The moment he stepped out of the small transfer point at Setting Sun Garrison Camp, there were more than 10 rainbow crystal fluxers with formidable might waiting to ambush him. The powers behind the ambush had already gone crazy. They surprisingly dared to attack within the garrison camp. The attackers consisted of 15 formidable rainbow crystal level fluxers who were led by 2 halted fluxers. Almost without giving Li Yunmu any time to respond, they attacked with fierceness. From the enormously powerful crossbows hidden secretly, one after another, volleys of bolts were shot, covering the heavens. The attacks were being launched from 2 buildings facing each other. The ambushers had installed the crossbows which shot poisoned bolts on Li Yunmu. However, they had greatly underestimated the power of a person who had crossed the 70th level just by relying on his own strength. They had also never expected that he had become a human-shaped Tyrannosaurus, since they didn't know that his great sun tyrant body muscle marrow secrets reached the minor threshold. In a split second, Li Yunmu's great sun tyrant body muscle marrow secrets was unleashed in the face of great danger, and the projection of a red sun appeared behind Li Yunmu's body. The temperature of his surroundings instantly increased by several hundred degrees, as if the place was affected by hot magma. The extremely toxic poison with which the bolts were laced immediately evaporated. And on the surface of Li Yunmu's crystal armor appeared Tyrant Body Energy Cover. Bang! 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 One by one, the enormously powerful crossbow bolts ruthlessly struck Li Yunmu's body. He will certainly die. Seeing this scene, the attackers couldn't help but get excited. They had carefully planned against Li Yunmu's formidable defense. They were certain that the terrifying penetrating power of the bolts shot by the several enormous crossbows would pierce through his defense. However, the reality was completely opposite to their expectations. When the bolts from the enormous crossbows struck Li Yunmu, he didn't suffer the slightest bit of damage and remained standing on a ground like a mountain. Safeguard, Admiralty cover, King Crystal armor, Tyrant body energy cover, as well as Tyrant body itself. The enormous crossbows with formidable penetrative power could barely break the Tyrant body protective cover, only touching the fifth layer of Li Yunmu's defense. But Li Yunmu still hadn't used the defense of Devil Dragon Bone armor as well as Heavenly World's damage absorption, so how could he get injured? However, since the ambushers had decided to deal with Li Yunmu, they wouldn't stop at only one wave of attacks. An enormous shadow which covered a large area appeared over Li Yunmu's head. This was a large thorny net built from some unknown material. It was the second attack of the ambushers. Their aim was clear: to use this net to suppress Li Yunmu's combat abilities and capture him alive. But they had greatly misjudged Li Yunmu's strength. Bang! He stamped on the ground, creating a fissure, and like a human artillery shell, he rushed forward. Two deadly ambushes proved to be insufficient to kill Li Yunmu. He didn't fly in the sky to dodge their attacks, either, but rather chose to face them head-on. This would certainly provide him more time to escape from the trapped zone before the large net fell on him. Right now, Li Yunmu's flesh was extremely tyrannical. So when he burst forth with speed, it took him less than a second to reach the pinnacle. He was away from under the large net in a heartbeat, and then launched a punch towards one of the halted fluxers. With such lousy methods, how dare you think that you can kill me? All of you will die here. At this instant, the fluxers at the setting sun garrison camp were shocked by Li Yunmu. They watched as his one punch filled with terrifying power and incomparable might directly strike at the chest of one of the halted fluxers. Bang! This halted fluxer, who had been concealing his identity, couldn't even handle one punch from Li Yunmu. It broke through his crystal armor and blew away his body protecting energy cover, crushing his chest. Run! The other halted fluxer turned deathly pale and shouted loudly while fleeing. They had been greatly mistaken regarding Li Yunmu's strength. He had become much more terrifying compared to the time he had fought against the 6 elite disciples of Chaotian Sect. All of you ants, die! The next instant, Li Yunmu kicked the ground and burst forth, chasing behind the halted fluxer. Once he was close, he launched another punch. The second halted fluxer couldn't escape the disaster, either. When Li Yunmu's punch struck his back, his flesh splattered everyone. No one knew that the power contained in Li Yunmu's one punch was so terrifying because it was actually the power of 7 punches. The onlookers simply couldn't tell the difference. The 15 rainbow fluxers who had thrown the net didn't dare to confront Li Yunmu at this moment and dispersed in all 4 directions. But they were unable to run away. After killing the 2 halted fluxers with 2 punches, Li Yunmu's shadow shook and divided into 6 shadows that rushed out to chase down the fleeing ambushers. As for Li Yunmu himself, he made a grab in the air, and the underworld raven S.H.A.D.W appeared in his hands. He then closed his eyes. First arrow, second arrow, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Regardless of how quickly the rainbow fluxers were fleeing, all of them were killed by the true sight arrows. With his tyrannical flesh, the thunder arrows shot by the underworld raven S.H.A.D.W were like missiles. They were extremely fast and filled with formidable might. Each new arrow was more accurate than the previous one and killed its target in one strike, regardless of whether they had flown into the sky or entered the ground. Formidable bow. Formidable power. For a few seconds, Li Yunmu's both hands seemed to be convulsing as they shot 9 arrows in a row. Each arrow represented the life of 1 rainbow crystal fluxer. The person who had run the farthest had already crossed the area of 3 miles, but he still couldn't save his life from the arrow. As for the other 6 people, they were chased down and killed by the 6 shadows in less than a minute. After the rainbow fluxers were dealt with, next came those hiding at the roofs of the 2 buildings. They also couldn't escape and were killed by the 6 shadows. One after another, heads of people flew into the sky, and in the blink of an eye, more than 50 fluxers were slaughtered by Li Yunmu. From the beginning of the ambush until the 6 shadows cleared the battlefield, not even 5 minutes had passed. In such a short time, Li Yunmu had killed all the attackers who had come to kill him. A minute after the terrifying group of attackers was cleared, the people in the setting sun garrison camp finally calmed down. Humph, tower cities and family? A clan of some trifling citadel dared to attack me. And family, today's debt will be paid in blood. After collecting the spoils, Li Yunmu opened his wings and instantly flew away. Although the ambushers had done their utmost to threaten Li Yunmu's life, they were still far from being able to achieve their goals. Li Yunmu's combat strength had already become monstrously powerful. The power of his flesh had by now surpassed everyone from the 5th dimension. Chapter 226, Sword Sage's Fury. Using wings of the wind, Li Yunmu advanced toward the Moro Mountain tenebrous hidden domain with lightning speed. By this time, the news about him being ambushed at the setting sun garrison had already been posted on all the online platforms of the 6 continents. The Yin family of Tower City has really low IQ, even Chaotian Sect couldn't do anything to Li Yunmu, but Yin family still dared to create trouble for him. Good God, the current Li Yunmu is a human-shaped monster. How can the power of his flesh be so terrifying? Yes, given the tyrannical power of his flesh, when the time comes for his body to enter the sage layer, I don't think he will face any problems. The video of Li Yunmu killing all the ambushers was quickly spread around. When people saw how he swept through the ambushers sent by the Yin family with lightning speed, all of them were left completely astonished. This Li Yunmu's strength is increasing very quickly. Halfway throughout the video, people saw Li Yunmu's reflection shaking once and 6 powerful shadows being summoned to kill the fleeing enemies. Could these be the shadow clansmen from the true 6th dimension? Surprisingly, he also possesses secondary flux energy. This Li Yunmu has concealed his secrets too deeply, some expert commented on the origins of Li Yunmu's shadow clansmen. Not only the veteran fluxer from the online platform, even Li Qinghong, Lin Jian, and the rest of Li Yunmu's followers, thought that his shadows belonged to the shadow clan of the true 6th dimension. However, how could outsiders know that these 6 shadows were not related to the shadow clan? Reportedly, the troops dispatched by the Yin family were led by 2 halted fluxers who were ranked within the top 30, yet they were crushed by Li Yunmu with just one punch. He didn't even use flux energy, simply relying on the power of his flesh. Too monstrous. Many people mocked Yin family for losing their brains and daring to provoke this lunatic Li. Yet when Yin family heard about this matter, they soon released an explanation that the people who had attacked Li Yunmu weren't related to them. When everyone heard this, a wave of shock passed through their hearts. This was chaos. The entire fluxer community was in great chaos. Yin family hastily produced a lot of evidence to prove that those people hadn't been sent by them. However, the wave of attacks wasn't over yet. Suddenly, the disciple of Sword Sage Ling Shuang also met with an accident. She was returning to the Sword Sect when she was attacked by 3 groups of masked attackers. This was on Earth, though, not the 5th dimension. Under the attack of the 3 groups, 2 of Ling Shuang's 4 junior sisters died. Ling Shuang also sustained injuries, but at the most crucial time, she and the other 2 junior sisters used Sword Sect's life-saving seals to kill more than 10 attackers and break through the siege. Reportedly, the highest-level expert among the attackers was a temporal flux master. Furthermore, there were even 2 transcendent flux masters. However, Sword Sect's disciples had many treasures to save their lives. They relied on the formidable might of the Sword Sect's treasures to kill more than 10 rainbow crystal fluxers and 1 transcendent flux master before escaping. Once this news came out, the whole world was left astonished. One of those women were a direct disciple of a battle sage while the rest were his sect's disciples, and someone had dared to attack them? Although there was no video since the ambush happened in the wilderness, Ling Shuang killing a transcendent flux master still caused many people to exclaim. However, this was just the beginning. Before long, a news which shook everyone spread across the 6 continents. Sword Sage was furious. Those who attacked Ling Shuang hadn't expected that they would infuriate a quasi-deity level existence to this extent. There was a secret organization located in the higher dimensional continent. In a single night, the whole organization, which comprised of more than 1,600 people, was flooded with corpses. Lots of information kept being transmitted, but reportedly, this secret organization's extermination was caused by Ling Shuang's master Sword Sage. In half a day, he had crossed to another continent and exterminated an enormous organization. No one had thought that a battle sage's response would be so fierce, but only a few people knew the real reason behind his fury. Right then, whoever dared to attack Ling Shuang would have to suffer the rage of this terrifying existence. However, even after Sword Sage's fury, the attacks didn't slow down. While returning to the Snow Temple, S.H.A.D.W was also ambushed. This attack would have even succeeded if S.H.A.D.W hadn't revealed her heavenly world. With the assistance of world power, she was finally able to escape the calamity. Yet the 2 temporal flux masters and 4 transcendent flux masters dispatched by the Snow Temple to protect her were killed. S.H.A.D.W had her own heavenly world. This news shocked many people. What happened next was according to expectations. When S.H.A.D.W returned to the Snow Temple after being injured, the whole place was shocked. The Snow Temple then made a public proclamation that they would certainly exterminate all the attackers and offered an extremely precious treasure, which startled the people to the extent that their mouths went agape, for anyone that could offer information on the attackers. The entire Snow Temple was now full of murderous intent. In less than half a day, 4 ordinary flux sages and 1 domain sage were dispatched toward the northern continent. Furthermore, S.H.A.D.W's master battle sage Snow had already rushed over there and started a killing spree. Sword Sage, Snow Sage, the fury of these 2 quasi-deity level existences kept burning the 6 continents for the whole day. But the attacks were still not over. On the 3rd day, astonishing news kept coming in one after another. Zhanbei was ambushed within the 5th dimension. Reportedly, some secret organization had planted a large amount of explosives on the route he had to take, which turned the perimeter of several kilometers into a death zone. But Zhanbei surprisingly didn't die in the explosion. However, when he came out of the death zone with serious injuries, he was attacked by 4 halted fluxers and several rainbow crystal layer fluxers. At the most crucial moment, an extremely formidable mysterious person attacked and savagely killed the few halted fluxers, then escaped from the scene carrying Zhanbei. Although this news wasn't as mind-boggling as Sword Sage and Snow Sage's fury, but within the 5th dimension, it wasn't one whit inferior. The most powerful person of the 5th dimension had surprisingly suffered serious injuries, and the enemy hadn't hesitated to use a large amount of explosives. But what caught the attention of people the most was the mysterious person who had saved Zhanbei. Who was he? The attacks on Li Yunmu, Ling Shuang, S.H.A.D.W, Zhanbei were just the beginning. After this, even Chaotian Sect's Ching also met with an accident. He was ambushed by 3 secret organizations who joined hands. The Flux Sage dispatched by Chaotian Sect to protect Ching suffered some serious injuries, then used some secret treasure of the sect to flee from the scene with his charge. Their whereabouts were currently unknown. The provoked Chaotian Sect sent several Flux Sages and a large amount of Flux Masters to rescue them right away. This was real chaos. The whole 6 continents were in chaos. For the several days after, the ambushes continued. When Tyrant Zhang left the territory of Barbarian King, he was also ambushed, but Barbarian King had been prepared for the attack and repelled the attackers. There were, of course, some ambushes which succeeded. Extreme Devil Path Sect's Yanxing was ambushed by a formidable secret organization, because of which this person who had recently become an unhindered fluxer after clearing the 70th level perished. As for the proud sons and daughters of heavens who continued to reach for the 70th level in the past few days, some of them also suffered ambushes. Many of these new stars who had just become unhindered began to fall one after another. Even then, many more powers still dispatched their disciples to clear the 70th level. What is happening in this world? This question rose up in the hearts of ordinary people and many fluxers who weren't privy to secret information. As for Li Yunmu, the first person who was attacked, he was completely forgotten as the news of astonishing events kept flooding in every day. Many people had already given up on the idea to attack him. Even many behind-the-scenes actors realized that killing Li Yunmu was even more difficult than killing Zhihanbei. The reason for this was his absolute defense, the headache of many would-be attackers. A large amount of explosives had been able to harm Zhihanbei, but it wasn't certain that it would pose any problem to Li Yunmu. Yet even so, some people were unwilling to give up and entered the Moro Mountain Tenebrous hidden domain. There, they used all sorts of underhanded methods to search for Li Yunmu's whereabouts. However, they could only discover that Li Yunmu was nowhere to be found. It was as if he and the 6 halted fluxers under his command had vanished from the 5th dimension. Chapter 227, Guessing at the Truth. Zhihanbei and Ling Shuang were also ambushed. At this time, Li Yunmu was leading his followers back into the king's true territory. As he did so, the news from the online platforms continued to get more and more explosive. Not only were numerous formidable people who possessed some unusual treasures attacked, even people who had cleared the 70th level of the Tower of Glory suffering attacks one after another. It was obvious that the current situation on Earth was chaotic, and Li Yunmu had received some information regarding it from battle sage Vega. He was thus certain that this was related to the spatial plane of Earth becoming unsteady, even if he didn't know in what way. Somehow the Continental battle had to be the key to it all. However, the information Li Yunmu had was still too little, to the extent that it was difficult for the system to make even a rough hypothesis regarding this situation. The system's ability to deduce things was very formidable, but without sufficient information it was directionless. Li Yunmu decided that he couldn't act passively now and had to seize the initiative to act. After putting some thought into it, he attempted to connect with Ling Shuang's stellar COMM. The ring echoed for a long time, but no one picked up, and Li Yunmu couldn't help but feel somewhat disappointed. However, before long, his pupils shrank, for he saw a small cyan-colored sword suddenly cross over not far from him. This sword, which was only the size of a finger, was emitting a cyan-colored light. After crossing over, it flew towards Li Yunmu. Summoning Crystal Sword. Lin Jian and the others cried out at the same time. After hearing the surprised cries, Li Yunmu became aware about what this thing was. He seemed to have thought of something and stretched out his hand to grab the small cyan sword with his hand. Information flowed into his mind with Ling Shuang's voice echoing in his mind. Do your best in the Continental battle and obtain the descendant qualifications, be careful. Continental battle? Descendant qualifications? Be careful? A thought took form in Li Yunmu's mind. Although Ling Shuang's speech was quite brief, he finally had a starting point. Descendant qualifications, these words carried the most significance. They also contained a profound meaning. When he heard them, it was as if the dense fog in front of Li Yunmu slightly dispersed, revealing a huge door. Although the fog in front of him was still quite dense, he had obtained sufficient information to start moving. System, using descendant qualifications as the core point, search for all information available. Ling Shuang hadn't talked to him via stellar COMM, but used the summoning sword crystal exclusive to Sword Sect to relay him the most crucial information. This raised Li Yunmu's spirits. He was certain that this secret was one of the most guarded ones in all 6 continents. If one used a stellar COMM to transmit it, this would open it up to leakage. Everyone was using all sorts of secure communication methods, and Li Yunmu had fortunately obtained one as well. It was his summoning crane crystal. He thought of something and then took it out to input the information. This time, the person he chose to make inquiries from was Lin Yuero. Before long, the red crystal crane returned back. However, Lin Yuero didn't have much information about this matter. In her message, she repeatedly warned Li Yunmu that the upcoming Continental battle was much more important compared to all those which happened before it. Moreover, the minimum qualification to take part in the Continental battle was to clear the 70th level of the Tower of Glory. She reminded Li Yunmu to carefully conceal his tracks, because all the powers on the 6 continents were fighting each other to obtain the qualifications to enter the Continental battle. Although Lin Yuero didn't know much about higher-level secrets, the information sent by her finally allowed Li Yunmu to realize something. The reason why people were crazily ambushing each other was surprisingly to obtain the minimum qualifications to enter the Continental battle, which was that a person must clear the 70th level of the Tower of Glory. There was no doubt that without even knowing it, Li Yunmu had already obtained the qualifications to participate in the Continental battle. When he combined this with the information sent by Ling Shuang, he understood that obtaining the qualifications to participate in the Continental battle was only the beginning. The descendant qualifications which Ling Shuang had talked about probably meant that only the victor would gain the right to fight for the descendant qualifications. Many questions arose from that line of thought. What are those descendant qualifications? What the F***ck are they actually? Is the cause of upheaval and instability in the Earth's space, the appearance of a new dimension? Is everyone fighting to qualify to enter this new dimension? Gradually, an outline began to form in Li Yunmu's head, and he couldn't keep his eyes closed any longer. He finally had an idea of how to take the initiative. No wonder all the unhindered fluxers are being ambushed. Or those people who have a powerful treasure or two on themselves. It all makes sense now why all of them are being killed in succession, including even sage-level powerhouses. The reason behind all of this is the 70th level of the Tower of Glory. When Li Qinghong and the others heard this, they couldn't help but gasp. Could the 70th level of the Tower of Glory be cleared that easily? The answer to this question was no. Clearing the 70th level was like suffering 9 deaths and still being alive. Among 10,000 flux disciples, only one person could clear the 70th level. But right then, this threshold had been turned into a qualification, so all powers in the 6 continents were crazily fighting over resources. Due to this, everyone who possessed a powerful treasure which could increase one's chances of clearing the 70th level of Tower of Glory was being targeted by all sorts of organizations. A single powerful treasure may not be enough to clear the 70th level, so everyone required a lot of external assistance to influence the preparation of their young members. This was one of the reasons which increased the number of people being killed. They were guilty of harboring jade. Even flux sages weren't exempt from this kind of disaster. Crazy, this is indeed extremely crazy. However, given this craziness, the importance of the descendant qualifications could be easily imagined. These people didn't hesitate whatsoever, even attacking battle sage disciples to slightly increase their chances. In this kind of world, a person like Li Yunmu who had already stepped over the threshold was naturally an even better target. Overall, there could be said to be 2 reasons behind attacks on people who had cleared the 70th level. First, since they had cleared the 70th level, then they had to have some sort of secret trump card. Thus, there was much gain from killing them. Second, killing each one of these people would reduce the number of competitors by 1. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. When Li Yunmu and the others understood this crucial point, they immediately realized that all unhindered fluxers were at great risk. Probably every power of the 6 continent would want to get rid of those unhindered fluxers who weren't related to them. This was the reason why, even though the female commander represented a battle sage, she had still suggested for Li Yunmu to return to the 5th dimension to ensure his safety given the current upheaval. It wouldn't be a surprise if a battle sage himself attacked someone. Too terrifying. Only now did Li Yunmu understand the importance of obtaining the qualifications for the Continental battle by clearing the 70th level of the Tower of Glory. He suddenly surveyed his 6 disciples with a strange gaze, which stopped at Li Qinghong and Lin Jian. "Master, why are you looking at us like this?" Lin Jian was somewhat intimidated by Li Yunmu's gaze. There is still a month and 13 days left until the Continental battle. I was thinking that the two of you could be trained to clear the 70th level. Once the 6 halted fluxers heard this, they were stunned. Becoming strong enough to clear the 70th level within a month? What kind of joke was this? Among the 6 people, even Li Qinghong, who was the most formidable and had the most profound resources at her disposal, had only been able to clear the 54th level and was unable to advance any further. Lin Jian had reached the 49th level, while the remaining 4 were stuck at the 44th level. The difference between these and the 70th level was just too enormous. In their hearts, Li Yunmiu clearing the 70th level without relying on any background support was already extremely abnormal. Yet surprisingly this wasn't enough for him and he wanted to train them to clear the 70th level. Master, you are too optimistic. Although all of you clearing the 70th level with 1 month's training isn't realistic, I have some certainty regarding the two of you. Especially Li Qinghong who harbors the undying sage blood in her body. We have the King's true territory and the Divine Blood King class dimensional beasts which are one of their kind supplements in this whole world. Who said you lot don't have hope? Since those descendant qualifications can even cause domain and even battle sages to move, then this is an opportunity which only comes once in 1,000 years. If we miss it, that would be a huge pity. Li Yunmi roughly understood the whole situation. He took a deep breath, and his expression grew even more firm. He decided that he must now make an all-out effort on this. He had to nurture at least 2 of these 6 followers of his to become strong enough. Otherwise, after the Continental battle, the strong would become even stronger and the weak would become even weaker. The people in the front would continue to move farther and farther, while those who fell behind would see the gap in strength increasing. He had to do his best, and not only put all his effort into it, but also demand the same from his subordinates. Otherwise, in the future, he would become really lonely once his strength greatly surpassed that of others. Chapter 228, Safeguard vs Universe Cover. System, compare Zhanbei and my strength. How great is the difference? Li Yunmiu firmly decided to compete with his full strength to obtain the descendant qualifications. But before he started his plan, he wanted to know, after the great increase in strength a few days ago, how far he was from the most powerful person of the 5th dimension. There was detailed information about Zhanbei's strength online, so it was extremely easy for the system to gather a large amount of data and provide a precise evaluation of Zhanbei's strength. And Li Yunmiu naturally wanted to use this as a benchmark to determine the current level of his strength. Although he was quite formidable, he knew that there was always someone better. The 6 continents were extremely large and contained countless flux disciples. The descendant qualifications had now caused an upheaval in the world, so maybe even more powerful people who had kept themselves hidden would also appear. That's why if Li Yunmiu couldn't even reach Zhanbei in terms of strength, then it was meaningless for him to contend against the whole world. According to Lin Jian, a person who belonged to Bloodywood, if the people from the 6 transcending powers also entered the Continental battle, then it would be really terrifying. Before this month ended, Li Yunmiu had to increase his strength to the level of Zhanbei, otherwise contending for supremacy would only be a disaster for him and nothing more. The system paused for a moment and then replied, according to the comparison between you two based on data online, the difference between host and Zhanbei's strengths is roughly 3 chips. 3 chips. This kind of difference means that I'm already quite close, but there is still some distance left to cover. Li Yunmiu sucked in a deep breath. 1 grade, 1 line, and 1 chip. Difference of 1 grade meant that the difference between them was of 1 whole class, which was extremely large. Difference of 1 line meant that the opponent had clear superiority. This superiority was evident, meaning it could be seen with a naked eye. The difference of 1.5 chip was comparatively close. It meant that both parties were so close that it was difficult to tell who was stronger and who was weaker. A thorough confrontation was required to see who would be the dominant one. As for the difference of 3 chips, this meant that the difference between the strength of 2 parties was quite thin, but it couldn't be said that they were at the same level. Zhanbei could still make Li Yunmu eat dirt. However, Li Yunmu wasn't depressed. How long had he spent cultivating? The other party had already been doing so for several years, while he himself was just a newcomer of this year. Li Yunmu still had a month, so he was pretty confident that he would be able to surpass Zhanbei in that time. He quickly entered his consciousness sea and opened the profile panel. Experience points, 368,000 points. Ability points, 1,089,300 ability points. Space elements, 17,630 points. Blood Fiend points, 370,543 points. The accumulation of the four major resources was pretty good, because the monsters in the Tower of Glory were extremely formidable, and when he went into the higher levels, their numbers also increased. Thus, during the 2 days when he was challenging the tower, he had reaped a large harvest. The experience points he had accumulated allowed him to congeal the 5th and 6th female shadows, which were named Li Mei and Li Lan. By now, the requirement for congealing the next shadow had reached 1 million experience points. The currently accumulated points were less than half of that. But Li Yunmu was convinced that if he continued with hacking in the king's true territory, it was like that he'll be able to congeal the 8th shadow before the Continental battle. However, his main priority now was to use the large amount of ability points and increase his strength by another notch. With 1.08 million ability points, he could upgrade any of his cultivation methods enormously. According to the grade of his cultivation methods, the first to advance should be the Great Sun Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow Secrets. However, after experiencing the qualitative change because of Divine Blood, it had already reached the 30th level. If he wanted to advance it to the 31st level, he would have to use 310,000 ability points. After he noticed that, Li Yunmu abandoned all thoughts of upgrading this skill for the time being. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but that after smashing 1 million ability points into it, the increase wouldn't be obvious. On top of that, if he wanted to increase it to the 31st level, he would also need to spend 10,000 space elements to purchase the next 10 levels. This was clearly not the most optimal move. The system had clearly explained it to him long ago that if he cultivated the technique in reality, then he wouldn't need to purchase the latter parts of the Great Sun Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow Secrets. After all, the cultivation in reality was based on the principle that where water flows a canal is formed, so he didn't need to spend the space elements to purchase the latter parts. This was the reason why even if he had only purchased the first 10 levels of Great Sun Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow Secrets, after undergoing the qualitative change caused by Divine Blood, the cultivation of the technique had advanced straight to the 30th level. Thus, Li Yunmu decided that unless the number of shadows he had reached a number allowing him to obtain a large amount of ability points with ease, he wouldn't upgrade it with the system. He could only accept the fact that given his current level of strength, his supreme body refining technique was too high grade for him. It was very difficult to advance it, and so Li Yunmu decided to spend the 1.08 million ability points on Admiralty cover. At this time, his Admiralty cover was at the 20th level. Apart from it reducing the damage by 50%, there was still Safeguard which blocked 20% of the incoming damage. Li Yunmu's defense was certainly at the peak of the 5th dimension, everyone in the whole world understood this. Among his absolute defense, Admiralty cover, this formidable damage-reducing cultivation method, was the cornerstone. Otherwise, even though Tyrant Body had reached a minor threshold and was very formidable, without the damage reduction from Admiralty cover, its defense wouldn't be so domineering. After making the decision, Li Yunmu didn't hesitate anymore and threw all the points on Admiralty cover. 21st level 10,000 ability points, upgrade. 22nd level 20,000 ability points, upgrade. 23rd level 30,000 ability points, upgrade. 30th level 100,000 ability points, upgrade. In one breath, Li Yunmu used up 550,000 ability points, and Admiralty cover broke through the third major threshold. At this moment, another new property was born. It was named Universe Cover. Universe Cover absorbs 30% of the enemy's attack and reverses the natural laws of the universe to turn it into one's own. When Li Yunmu looked at the explanation of this new property, his heart picked up speed. He had to say that this Admiralty Cover's power was just too heaven-defying. Universe Cover could absorb the offensive power of the enemy's attack, and not only did it absorb it, it even turned it into his power. This would be a huge supplement when in a battle and make this an extremely terrifying ability which would greatly increase his endurance. Chapter 229, I also have a killing spell. Damage Reflection, Safeguard, Universe Cover. Li Yunmu thought for some time, then clenched his teeth. He still decided to follow his route to the extreme and continuously upgrade his absolute defense. Because of this, he chose to retain Safeguard. After being upgraded to the 30th level, it could already block 30% of the incoming damage, which was then reduced further by 60% because of Admiralty Cover. The effectiveness of this damage reduction ability could cause people's hairs to stand up. If 100 points of damage were inflicted upon him, then they would first be reduced by 30%, leaving behind only 70 points of damage, which would then be reduced by 60%. The final amount of damage that passed through Admiralty Cover would then be just 28 points. In other words, just by relying on Admiralty Cover, he could weaken the enemy's attack by more than 70%. What opponent wouldn't despair after learning of this? Currently, the most formidable person in the fifth dimension was certainly S.H.A.D.W, but the person with the greatest defense was certainly Li Yunmu. Perhaps his offense couldn't be compared to S.H.A.D.W's, but when talking about defense, S.H.A.D.W couldn't claim any superiority over Li Yunmu. This was why that number 1 halted fluxer had been seriously injured by the large amount of explosives. If it had been Li Yunmu, perhaps not a single damn point of damage would have been inflicted upon him. In other words, his defense could only be broken by relying on weapons with extraordinary attack power, like runic spears. Otherwise, nothing could break through. This was why the ambushers had relied upon a large number of heavy crossbows to kill him. However, they hadn't expected that after Li Yunmu's tyrant body attained the minor threshold, its defense became even more domineering. I still have 530,000 ability points, pour them all into Admiralty Cover. By now, Admiralty Cover had been upgraded to the 30th level, and the damage reduction had already reached 60%. Since Li Yunmu had decided to walk this path to the extreme, he then poured out all of his remaining ability points into this unusual cultivation method. 31st level, 100,000 ability points, upgrade. 32nd level, 200,000 ability points upgrade. After pouring 300,000 ability points, he could only upgrade the cultivation method to the 32nd level and attain 6%, raising his defense by a bit. System, what about now? What is the difference between me and S.H.A.D.W? After advancing his Admiralty Cover to the 32nd level in one breath and Safeguard's damage reduction increasing after reaching the threshold of the 30th level, Li Yunmu's defense had increased explosively. At this time, he again asked about the disparity between him and S.H.A.D.W. Only 2 chips. Moreover, with host's current strength, an opponent at the level of S.H.A.D.W couldn't threaten your safety. The system paused for a moment, then added, naturally, this hypothesis is based on the strength which he has revealed publicly. If he has some additional strength which he has concealed, then like before there will be a certain amount of disparity between you and him. Li Yunmu nodded, implying that he already knew that. Everyone had their trump cards, which definitely wouldn't be revealed to the public. However, his aim for now was only to get close to the level of strength which that man had publicly revealed. That alone would be sufficient. Because after this, he would still continue to increase his strength. After coming out of his heavenly world, he returned to the transfer point in King's True territory where Li Qinghong and the others were sitting in a circle. During the next month, our goal is to increase our strength till the bottleneck. To achieve this, we need to kill a 12 Rainbow Light King ahead of us. This time, Li Yunmu had prepared well. After continuously increasing his strength, especially since his tyrant body had attained the minor threshold and Admiralty cover improved a lot, he wanted to have another battle with the Divine 8 Rainbow Light Devil King. At the moment, they didn't have much time left. So he immediately led everyone into the domain of the 12 Rainbow Light King after passing through the plains where ape gods were roaming around. This time, when everyone entered the plains, 50 or 60 ape gods had gathered there. But because Li Yunmu was pressed by time, he didn't command his followers to attack. He kicked the earth and like a human-shaped monster rushed towards the group of beasts by himself. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Li Yunmu shook 6 times and every time a shadow separated from his body. Bang, 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 bang. With 1 person and 6 shadow as well as the mist fiend attacking, Li Yunmu didn't even need to use flux energy and relied solely on world power and the strength of his flesh. Continuous punches of world-killing fist ruthlessly killed more than half of the ape gods. In a heartbeat, the rest of the ape gods who were transformed by divine blood were left crippled and then were brought into the heavenly world. The number of ape gods in Li Yunmu's heavenly world attained new heights, crossing more than 150. Master's strength has increased again. You're simply a human-shaped killing machine. For some reason, when I see Master battling, I feel my heart palpitating, like when I see Zihanbei and Mantian's battles. Li Qinghong and the others were greatly startled. In less than 10 days, Li Yunmu's strength had leaped up by a great margin once again. Right then, even killing these formidable rainbow crystal dimensional beasts which had been transformed by divine blood was no different for him from slaughtering ordinary rainbow crystal dimensional beasts. Just by relying on the power of his flesh, he brutally suppressed every ape god, and soon, they returned to the domain of the divine blood devil king. If it had been an ordinary king's domain, then with Li Yunmu's present strength, only the 12 Rainbow Light King would force him to expand some effort. However, this domain belonged to a king-dimensional beast who had been transformed by divine blood, and thus even someone as domineering as Li Yunmu could only survey the surroundings cautiously from the distance. Master, Woe aren't capable of handling phantom kings, let alone divine blood devil kings. It's too dangerous. When faced with the divine blood devil kings, Demon had already become afraid. As for Li Yunmu, he could now fight a divine blood devil king on his own, and according to his estimations, each of his shadows could also fight with a devil king. Mist Fiend could also be included in the calculations now. With his current strength, he was also a devil king transformed by divine blood. However, underneath the mound on which they had established their camp, there were 3 devils kings and 26 divine blood phantom kings leading a terrifying amount of dimensional beasts. They were all freely roaming about. Everyone's intention of attacking together was swiftly dispelled. However, since Li Yunmu had dared to return, he naturally had come prepared. He waved his hand and 4 runic spears weapons appeared on the mound. Demon, Barbarian Nu, the 2 of you will be responsible for these weapons. Li Yunmu commanded without giving any leeway for hesitation. He then made another grab at the air, and a small 8 attribute yellow banner appeared in his hand. Once this small 8 attribute yellow banner appeared, all his followers instantly cried out in surprise, Dark Flux 8 spell banner. That's right, you're all pretty good. This is exactly that Dark Flux 8 spell banner which cost me tower badges. It's one-of-a-kind item in this world. Li Yunmu laughed mischievously. This was another great harvest he had obtained from the Tower of Glory. With his golden crystal fluxer cultivation, after the 50th level the drop rate of tower badges in each level's small and big boss rooms had increased significantly. When he reached the 60th level and then the 70th, the drop rate became even higher. Thus, after rushing to the 70th level to exchange for the soul of refining pagoda, he still had another goal. It was to exchange for the Dark Flux 8 spell banner to conquer this king's true territory. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the confidence to be able to train his followers in the short time they had to the point that they could clear the 70th level of the Tower of Glory. After obtaining the Dark Flux 8 spell banner, everything was different. Regardless of whether it was the Divine Blood Phantom Kings or Divine Blood Devil Kings or Divine Blood Kings, all of them would be killed one by one. Chapter 230, Killing Spells Formidable Might. Dark Flux 8 spell banner was similar to the Sun God Flame killing spell of Chaotian Sect and could also be considered as an existence worthy of entering a big sect's reserves. Reportedly, many powers had their eyes on this Dark Flux 8 killing banner, but since it required an unusually high amount of tower badges and could only be obtained after clearing the 70th level, until now, no one had had the resolve to purchase it. Because of this, Blade Overlord and the others hadn't expected that their master would return with such an item. Determined people were really fast and ruthless, without any hint of hesitation in their actions. Dark Flux 8 spell banner had 8 types of Dark Flux flags, and each of these represented a type of Dark Flux energy. They were classified as Thunder, Wind, Heat, Ice, Earth, Demon, Flame, and Poison. Each of the above-mentioned Dark Flux energies represented a destructive power, with Thunder leading the pack. The only difference between Dark Flux 8 spell banner and Chaotian Sect's Sun God Flame killing spell was that it didn't need every person who operated a killing flag to first cultivate the Sun God Flame energy. It only required the 8 Fluxers operating it to possess different types of Dark Flux energy. This was the reason why Li Yunmu had chosen to exchange for it. I can control the flame flag. Li Qinghong, who was clearly knowledgeable about this Dark Flux 8 spell banner, took the initiative to choose the flame flag. I cultivate the dark wind, I will take the wind flag, Devil Monkey stated. I cultivate a demonic power, leave the demon flag to me. Demon took the initiative to take the demon flag. Flowing Cloud hesitated for a moment, then decided to reveal her stand. Although the cultivation of my Sun God Flame energy has been abolished, I had secretly cultivated the freezing Dark Flux energy. Leave the ice flag to me. When other people heard this, they were left flabbergasted. No one had expected that Flowing Cloud had not only cultivated flame energy, but also the ice energy. Flame and ice were two completely opposite attributes, yet she had been secretly practicing both. It was clear that this woman's true abilities weren't that simple. My power is dark poison, so the poison flag is most suitable for me. Underworld hand moved to take the poison flag. In a short while, 5 of the 8 followers took the initiative to choose one of the 8 types of powers of Dark Flux 8 spell banner. Yet there were still 3 remaining. With a disappointed expression, Barbarian Niu gloomily said, My desolate continent mainly cultivates the power of bloodlines, so I'm just here to buy soy sauce. I also haven't cultivated any sort of Dark Flux energy and have wholeheartedly devoted myself to my sword. Seems like I'm also here just to buy soy sauce, Lin Jian said, smiling bitterly. I will take up the position for Thunder Flag. Although the Dark Flux 8 spell banner isn't complete as we can only fill 6 of the 8 positions, but coupled with the runic spears, we'll have enough offensive power. Li Yunmu possessed Thunder, Flame, and Demon types of Dark Flux attributes, so he could occupy 3 positions by himself. Yet 2 people had taken the initiative to fill 2 of those positions, so he naturally filled the only one left, the Thunder Flag position. Only 6 of the 8 flags could be used at this moment. Although this wasn't perfect and incomparable to the formidable might that could be displayed by the Dark Flux 8 spell banner at its peak, it was a plenty right then. Li Yunmu and his followers didn't have high requirements for the forbidden weapons. All they wanted was to be able to F***CK their enemies. Each of the 6 people became master of one flag and arranged the killing spell stealthily under the ground. As for Blade Overlord and Barbarian Niu, they were to control the 4 runic spears. Everything was established perfectly. Li Yunmu waved his hand slightly, and the 6th shadow appeared behind him, holding 6 underworld raven sage bows and shot 6 arrows in succession toward the several monsters roaming underneath. The next instant, 3 divine blood devil kings leading the 26 phantom kings rushed forward. Following behind them was a large group of dimensional monsters, which varied in grade, ranging from silver crystal to rainbow crystal. These dimensional beasts who weren't king class might not have had the chance to devour divine blood, but they were still no ordinary monsters from the outside world. The different environment had affected them, greatly raising their natural strength. Looking at the several hundred monsters, the lowest of which possessed the strength of a silver crystal layer, pouncing on them, everyone felt their backs turn wet from sweat. Apart from Li Yunmu who had abnormal defense, if any one of them became careless, they would lose their lives right here. Since the Dark Flux 8 spell banner lacked 2 flags and wasn't at its peak condition, they were anxious whether it would be able to exterminate the 3 terrifying divine blood devil kings. However, an item which required tower badges couldn't be simple. Even though they could only operate the power of 6 flags, the next scene still astonished everyone. What was called a deadly spell? It was power of higher level than what most formidable flux disciples could possess. Ordinary flux disciples would never have the opportunity to obtain dark flux energy, so there was no chance for them to ever encounter such a spell. If that wasn't so, then all the sects and major organizations wouldn't view these deadly spell as part of their foundation. The 3 devil kings were advancing at an abnormally fast speed. The several kilometers between them was covered in less than 10 seconds, but at the moment they entered the Dark Flux 8 spell banner's range, they went crazy, as if they were in a dream. Although Dark Flux 8 spell banner had 8 flags, each of which was related to one attribute of Dark Flux energy, it actually had another sort of core power. It was the power of illusion, which was the core strength of this spell. As long as one entered the effective range, the Dark Flux 8 spell banner would produce a high-level illusion. Although the 3 devil kings were extraordinarily tyrannical, the transformation they underwent because of divine blood didn't help much in front of high-level illusions. When Li Yunmu and the others used the Dark Flux 8 killing spell and arranged the domain, the 3 devil kings entrapped were faced an unprecedented crisis. They felt like they had entered an extremely vast valley. It was arranged in a crisscrossing pattern, forming a large-scale maze. The 3 devil kings kept running around that maze, which made certain that they didn't take even one step towards Li Yunmu and his group. At this moment, when Li Yunmu saw the effects of the deadly spell with his own eyes for the first time, he felt that he was extremely fortunate. If he hadn't cultivated the Great Sun Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow secrets and Chaotian Sect's Great Sun secret technique, which allowed him to become inherently compatible with the Sun God Flame killing spell, he might not be here today. If back then he'd had to rely on his strength alone to forcefully withstand the Sun God Flame killing spell, he most likely would have knelt that day. Bang! While the 3 divine blood devil kings kept running around the illusionary valley in confusion, one of them took the initiative to charge towards the ice flag corner which was controlled by flowing cloud. The next instant, enormous ice cones began to rain down from the sky towards the devil king. After the first wave of attacks, everyone outside could clearly see that half of the rainbow light on the devil king's body had been extinguished. Formidable power! Once everyone saw this scene, they were all left astonished. Just one attack had extinguished half of the rainbow light on the body of a devil king. It has to be recalled that back then Li Yunmu together with his 4 shadows had only been able to extinguish this much of the rainbow light when he had attacked the devil king using the 27 stacked strikes of Violent Blade.